So we'll start at the beginning. How do you get started? And I've talked a little bit briefly about this already, but let's talk about it in more detail. So my first tip around this is just to start somewhere. It doesn't even matter if it's not the most logical place. Psychologically, it can be a boost just to have something down on paper, and that can actually have a really good snowball effect also. So start writing as early as you possibly can. Don't put it off till later. It's really great to have some information written that you can come back to later, and that can also make the writing task seem less onerous overall. Whenever I talk about the importance of writing early, it always makes me smile. I remember one of my very first pieces of research I did, which looked at master's students who had just finished writing a thesis. And the project was asking them what sort of advice they'd give fellow students. So having just finished, if they were giving advice to someone who was just beginning, what would they say? Obviously, that was a very qualitative project. But one of the strongest pieces of advice that was given was to write as early as possible. So write from day one and continue to write throughout. And when I completed that piece of research, I was actually doing my PhD at the time, and somewhat amusingly, I failed to take on my own research advice. So I delayed writing for my PhD. And it got to the point where I was almost paralyzed. I delayed so much that when it got to the point where I had to start writing, I felt like I just wasn't able to actually start. I remember thinking how ironic that was, because I had heard those comments from other people who had been writing a thesis. Now, another tip for getting started is to begin with something easy. For me personally, the easy stuff is usually my methods section. That's something that I feel very confident about writing, and it's usually relatively easy to describe something that you did. Alternatively, something easy might be some of your findings that are just quite descriptive. While it's important to have very sort of analytic level writing, there is some stuff that can only be described descriptively. So that's also something that's very easy to start with. That can help you get into the swing of things with your writing, and that can assist later with more complex sections that you might need to write. Now, sometimes writing an outline is a good place to start, and that can help you get a little bit more focused before you get started. You might want to consider how to best structure your write-up, for example. Are you going to do it sequentially? Will it be around your themes, perhaps around your cases? Or are you going to base it around the research questions or objectives of your study? So just having a think about how you're going to structure your writing and doing a little bit of an outline around that can help get you underway, and it can also help identify any gaps that you have in your analysis, which is really useful. I'm quite a visual person, so one way that I like to create an outline of my writing is I create a visual map of it. And most of the visual mapping software these days actually allows you to convert visual maps into written outlines. So it means I can sort of draw what I want my writing to look like and then very quickly have it converted into a written outline. I will be talking a little bit later on today about software that might help you do that. Now, making use of existing material can be helpful. Great strategy, really, because it gives you instant word count, which is fabulous. And again, psychologically, if you're copying and pasting existing material, can just be a bit of a boost to help you get things going. Now, in terms of what sort of existing material you might use, it might be pasting sections from your original proposal or a research outline, or if you have begun the data analysis process, you may have been creating memos along the way, and sometimes your data analysis memos can be a really good place to start your writing. Similar to drafting an outline, Sometimes writing the conclusion first and working backwards from there can be helpful. That's not a strategy I've tried myself, but I have colleagues that have found that really, really helpful. Just helps sort of crystallise their thinking and get them started so that they can see the big picture first and then break that down further. Now, I've just had a question come in from Vicky that I've spotted that's probably worth addressing to the whole group around what I mean by a memo. Now, I don't want to get too in detail about this because it's more of a data analysis technique, but memos in qualitative research are really just your own thoughts, thinking, and reflections. One of my favourite authors in this area, Pat Baisley, has a lovely way of describing memos, which is it's like having a discussion with yourself. So memos are really just your thoughts, perhaps around some data collection you've done. You might have some memos around observations that you've made during an interview. Or once you've started coding your qualitative data, you might be making a memo about what some of the bigger picture ideas are that are coming up from that coding. So they're just a few examples of what a memo is. They're an optional tool in qualitative research, but they can be a really useful technique for getting underway with your writing. So memos pretty much having a conversation with yourself, and there's no sort of set format or rules around what that might look like. So I hope that answers that okay, Vicky. Now, just my last tip for getting started. Sometimes we have difficulty starting because we don't know what our final product will look like. So a really useful strategy is to have a look at other people's write-up.